Help me out here. My understanding is the Trump administration has, I think, 13 billionaires in office right now, leading government agencies. Is that about right, do you think?
I have no idea, Senator.
I think that's what the number is. Do you think it's a coincidence, given the large number of billionaires in the Trump administration, that this particular piece of legislation would provide $235 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2% by expanding the exemptions in the estate tax?
Senator, I will tell you that when the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, my tax rate went up.
Well, I don't know your exact situation, but I can tell you. Tell me about how many people do you think are in the top 0.2%?
Sorry?
Number of people in the top 0.2% who would benefit from this particular $235 billion tax break?
Well, I know the top 10% is
right.
now paying 7%.
That's not the question.
The total tax.
My question is, why do you think at a time of unprecedented income and wealth inequality, when people like yourself economically have never, ever had it so good, why do you think it's a good idea to cut Medicaid for low-income and working-class people by $700 billion to give $235 billion in tax breaks to the very, very, very richest people in this country, perhaps a few hundred families? Please justify that and tell me about that.
Well, Senator, I don't know, but the Democrats had the trifecta, and there was no tax increase or wealth tax on billionaires. You choose.
I'm not talking about a tax.
You chose not to
Mr.
do
Besson,
that,
I am not talking about a wealth tax. Explain. A few hundred of the wealthiest families in this country, $235 billion tax break. Explain to the American people why you think that's a great idea.
I think that this will increase small businesses substantially. That most small businesses, they are...
Has zero to do, come on, you're smarter than that. This is the top 0.2%. This is not a mom and pop store. These are multi-billionaires, and the savings go to their kids after they pass away. This is nothing more than a gift to billionaires in this country.
Well, sir, that's just not correct, because the top 10% paid a bigger share of taxes after TCJA.
I'm talking about one provision in this. I don't want to argue with you about taxes in general. One provision, few hundred families, $235 billion in tax breaks. You can't justify that because morally it is totally unjustifiable. Let me ask you another question. If you guys want to cut $1 trillion in Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the estimate from CBO, I believe, is that over 15 million people lose their health insurance. Yale University and the University of Pennsylvania estimated that when you throw that many low-income and working-class people off of health care, some 50,000 people a year will die. Tell me why you think it's a good idea to give tax breaks to billionaires and allow 50,000 low-income and working-class people to die unnecessarily?
Senator, first of all, that's overstated by 5.1 million. That is not attributed to this bill. It is simply...
It's a combination. That's true.
No. You all had a scheduled expiration of Obamacare subsidies, and you did not extend that when you were in charge. 5.1 million. 1.4 million illegal aliens on Medicaid.
All right, look,
and there are work requirements. And our goal is to get more money to children and mothers.
Really? Your goal is to get more money to children, and working people. Really, come on. Do you know how many people, and I was surprised to hear this, I don't know if you know it or not, how many people lose their jobs every year, quit, get fired or whatever? Do you have any idea?
Well, there's something called the quits rate, and so when the job market is strong, more people quit.
But yeah, I was surprised that I just researched this. I don't know. Do you happen to know?
I don't know the number.
I was surprised. I mean, would it be shocking to you? It was to me. 20 million people leave their jobs a year. Doesn't shock you, right? It's a big labor force, right?
Yep.
So some guy leaves the job, maybe they move, maybe something happens in their lives, right? We have a lot of transition in the labor market, correct?
Maybe they get a better job.
Right, exactly, maybe they do. Or maybe they have to stay home, their wife gets sick, whatever, we don't know. But 20 million people lose their jobs in a given year, leave their jobs in a given year. Are those people lazy? What happens when I leave my job and maybe I have to move to another state to take care of my ill mother, and I desperately need Medicaid? Am I too lazy now to be able to get Medicaid?
I think that's a mischaracterization of the work requirement.
Really? Well, I'm not quite so sure it is. I don't, okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Bessent, Secretary Bessent, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator Warren.
You're the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you, what is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you. So do the Conservative Tax Foundation and Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, conservative groups. Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
okay, so,
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score. Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care, but it matters not. It does matter to you if we're knocking people off their health care, but not.
Well, first of all, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
First of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much, but it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're kind of taking a shortcut to getting you really well informed about what makes an economy tick and maybe how it could thrive better. We're diving into some really interesting sources that critique current models, but also lay out a blueprint for growth. Our mission, get you the key facts and insights fast.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant stuff. These sources, they present a pretty compelling case for shifting our economic focus.
Yeah.
Helps you understand not just what they're proposing, but the why behind it.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The sources, they start by pointing out some critical issues with the current model. First one they flag, something they call a tariff-heavy strategy. Now, the idea is often, protect local industry, right? But these sources argue it often just means higher prices for consumers and really strained international trade. So instead of protecting, it can actually, destabilize things, creates inefficiency.
Right, and that connects directly to another major critique they have, which is the economic fallout from reduction in workforce linked to immigrant deportation. The viewpoint in these sources is pretty clear. This shrinks the labor pool significantly. And that's not just about jobs. It seems it can stifle productivity, maybe even trigger a downward spiral.
Especially with growing populations and demand.
Exactly. Especially then. It really makes you question, or rather it makes the sources question how we value and use human capital. We're just relaying their perspective here, of course.
Okay, so they identify these big pressure points. Tariffs may be backfiring, workforce reduction hurting the economy. But they don't just stop there, right? They pivot to solutions. They lay out this pretty comprehensive blueprint for what they see as a stronger, more inclusive economy. Starts with really encouraging new businesses.
Yeah, fostering entrepreneurship, innovation.
Right, specifically to meet that rising demand we mentioned, and importantly, create jobs.
And what's really interesting, I think, is their emphasis on supporting human capital. The sources argue for, preserving and welcoming immigrants. They underline their contribution to the workforce, cultural richness, economic activity. It's a core idea from this material, definitely. A different way to look at growth.
And it's not just domestic, is it? This vision goes beyond borders. They talk about international collaboration, getting local businesses hooked up with international partners to really drive growth and, expand markets.
And they also really zero in on empowering small businesses, proposing that markets should be sort of designed to actively help smaller companies' local branches.
How would that work?
Well, they mentioned things like targeted investments, not just big corporations, but individuals chipping in too, like creating a more local economic engine.
Okay, that's interesting. Then there's this idea of digitally driven financial systems. It sounds quite high tech. The sources are suggesting using modern, fast digital finance tools for better control, more efficiency in how the economy produces things.
Yeah, it's like creating an economic nervous system almost, allowing for quicker adjustments, maybe spotting inefficiencies you couldn't see before.
And that seems to feed into their point on resource sustainability.
Exactly. They talk about developing natural resources, but also large-scale recycling. The goal seems twofold. Lower costs for people and, help the environment by turning waste into something valuable.
Then things get maybe a bit more complex with productivity-based cost and income ratings. What's that about?
as the sources propose it, it's like linking someone's financial contribution directly to their measurable output, their value created, not just a flat salary.
Right. It's presented as a potential paradigm shift, trying to get a more, I guess, accurate and balanced financial structure by tying individual output to economic value. Could prevent market distortions, perhaps?
Which I suppose leads into their idea of an equitable tax system. Yeah, the model in the sources suggests those with higher incomes pay proportionally more. But for lower income folks, their contribution is adjusted based on, well, not just income, but their economic activity, what the sources call calculated demand.
So the aim is fairness.
Fairness, yeah. Making sure essential demand isn't crushed, but also not overburdening any particular group. That's the idea presented.
And the final piece of their blueprint seems to be inclusive investment, using both public and private money to specifically lift up small businesses.
Ensuring more people get a piece of the economic pie, essentially. Broader participation.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit there, from the critiques to this detailed blueprint.
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you, the listener? How could these kinds of shifts, moving away from tariffs and workforce reduction towards innovation, human capital, these equitable systems, how could that actually change the economic landscape, maybe even your daily life?
It's definitely a different vision. Our look into these sources shows this picture of an economy driven by, well, innovation, fairness, shared prosperity, leading to, hopefully, a vibrant economy, more participation.
So, building on these ideas from the sources, here's a thought to leave you with. What do you think is the single biggest challenge, but also maybe the most crucial step in actually moving towards an economy that truly puts shared prosperity first for everyone?
That's a really big question, something to mull over. We definitely encourage you to keep thinking about it and continue your own deep dive into these concepts.